All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We've got two of my colleagues here on the show, and we're going to have sort of an open discussion today around liberal arts colleges, polytechnic institutions, and the key differences between those types of institutions and how you might consider one or the other as you're making your college choice. So, joining me from, well, across the river is Serena Frisina. Hi, Serena. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
Great to have you. And Serena, your background, both in admissions and also in terms of your undergraduate career, was at a liberal arts college. Do you want to tell folks about that briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Lewis and Clark College, and that's where I spent about 10 years of my career in college admissions. So absolutely biased. I think that liberal arts colleges are the best. No, they are the best for students like me, not for everyone. And so I'm excited to dive into that a little bit more.
Right. And we're not, well, we're going to try and put off any kind of competitive vibe as much as we can for as long as we can, but I am sure that it will out at some point here. Also joining me is Zaragoza Guerra. He's coming from Texas today, I believe. Zaragoza, you have a background both as a student in a great books curriculum and then also as an admission officer at technical institutions. Can you introduce folks to your CV?
Absolutely. So I went to Notre Dame, which is more a comprehensive university, but I studied great books, and my particular program was a pretty small group of students, and it was intensely liberal arts, I would say. I then went off and did a little bit of college counseling after college, and then ended up working for MIT, which was very different, a very different institution,
Yeah.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And the education given, the curriculum given, was very different than what I studied. I also worked at Caltech on the other coast, where, again, similarly, the education was very different than my own undergraduate education. So.
Big differences. When I think of movies about Notre Dame versus like MIT, I'm thinking of Rudy versus Good Will Hunting. So like that, I think
Exactly.
really highlights some of the major factors of those schools. Zaragoza, I want to come back to you, right? Because we're going to talk about liberal arts colleges versus polytechnic institutions, but you've raised an important point, which is that comprehensive universities, Research One universities, will sometimes incorporate both elements into their offerings. And I want to acknowledge that before we turn into the more specific spaces. Can you just give a brief introduction to folks about where a university brings all of these things under one umbrella? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics.
Absolutely. I would say a university is oftentimes going to have a combination of both a liberal arts college as well as perhaps a technical institute, so to speak. A university, a comprehensive university, is going to the university is the overall umbrella, and underneath that overall umbrella, you've got several different colleges. You might have a college of liberal arts, a college of arts and sciences, or a college of engineering, or a college of business, or a college of nursing. And then you're also going to have, more than likely, a graduate program. So in addition to the undergraduate colleges, you're going to have some graduate programs. That's a little bit different from, let's say, a standalone college, which is usually predominantly going to be an undergraduate school, perhaps, not always, but usually would be an undergraduate school that's going to encompass several different majors, okay? And such a school could be housed at a comprehensive university. An institute of a comprehensive university might be similar to, let's say, what I'm going to be talking about later on in terms of a tech school, but it is a little bit more comprehensive in nature. So I'll
Gotcha.
save that distinction for further in the conversation.
And just because we're talking about liberal arts colleges that can predominantly be undergrad, it doesn't mean that there aren't also graduate programs in some cases that are attached to those. I went to Reed College, where I also worked in admissions. At Reed, we have functionally no master's program at all. There's a very small Master of Arts and Liberal Studies program, but it's quite small. Serena, at Lewis and Clark, there's both an undergraduate institution, but also quite a competitive law college attached as well.
Yeah, and actually a graduate school. So technically, Lewis and Clark should be a university because we have those associated with us. But they are all separate campuses and sort of separate entities. So it's, yeah, I mean, there's no hard and fast rules in colleges.
And that's an important piece to note, is that there aren't any hard and fast rules. And one of the things about liberal arts colleges is that there's this openness of exploration, which I think can sometimes be a little intimidating for students. Let's just talk about the definition of liberal arts, Serena, because I don't love, it feels like bad PR, like bad marketing, right? We're not really telling people what they're getting from a liberal arts education with the phrase liberal arts. So can you help to define it for folks who might be new to the concept?
Absolutely. And it's funny, this morning I have my definition, and you hear different definitions. I actually searched it because I was curious, like, what technically is the definition of a liberal arts college? And again, Ian, I think you're exactly spot on there. Like, all of the definitions are just even more vague than liberal arts. So we just study, politics and arts. No, that's not it. I think the way that I define a liberal arts education is sort of an education for students who want to be lifelong learners, who want to adapt and to be flexible, who want breadth in their subject areas, but also may want to take a deep dive in a few specific subjects. What I, straying away a little bit from the definition, but what I really like about a liberal arts education is that you can take a subject like computer science even, or political science or biology, and you can pull from a variety of different areas. So often liberal arts students are strong writers. They are strong public speakers and thinkers, and that's kind of the big focus of a liberal arts education. And again, the way that I think about it is you have a doctor who you also want to be a good communicator. You want them to have skills outside of simply medicine or biology, right? And so that kind of takes that, pulling from these different areas, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more, but that's my definition with some examples there.
Our family doctor, we chose because she went to Swarthmore College. We were like, where did she do her undergrad? Liberal arts college. Perfect. Because we knew that her medical training was going to be excellent because of the standards applied to MDs, but we wanted to know, where did she go to undergrad? And by the way, she is a phenomenal communicator. She was so wonderful to talk to. She's great at problem solving. And I credit her liberal arts education for that. I should ask her about that next time, if she would make that same determination. Now, I love that you mentioned the sciences, because a lot of folks will think about liberal arts and they'll exclude the sciences. They'll say, well, computer science, I can't do that at liberal arts college. I can't do chemistry. I can't do biology. That's not necessarily the case. And students are able to major in those subject areas. I took chemistry as a first-year student when I was at Reed. Polytechnic institutions are a little different in terms of their approach to science, right? It's not just that there's biochem, physics, CS, math, but there's something a little bit different in terms of their focus. So how do the sciences show up at Institutes of Technology, Zaragoza?
Yeah, the sciences are going to be a bit different, and I'd probably say they're going to be pretty comprehensive. As we were talking about the differences, let's say between colleges and universities, and universities and institutes of technologies, I'd probably say the main difference is that they are going to be a little bit more comprehensive in nature, and they are going to have a bit more of a focus. I'd say that a polytechnic or an institute of technology, they're going to tend to be a bit more hands-on. They're going to be a bit more practical. You're going to see a lot of students applying their education. So it's not necessarily simply going to be an intellectual endeavor. It's going to be probably a more hands-on experience. So you'll see many more opportunities, perhaps, or at least you might have seen some of this be developed at some institutes of technology in terms of co-ops, in terms of research opportunities, and so forth, to give those students the opportunity to take that theoretical knowledge and apply it. So they are a bit more applied in nature.
Yeah.
And you'll see what is offered at a technical school. It's not simply STEM. The vast majority of them are dedicated to STEM, but you are going to see some outliers there in terms of what is offered. So they will be offering some humanities and social sciences as well as a liberal arts college, but the main focus would be STEM usually. Oftentimes, at a Polytechnic or an institute tech school, many students are having to take, as part of their degree requirements, a ton of math, a ton of physics, a ton of chemistry, and it depends on the school, biology and so forth, and as well as a complement of the humanities and social sciences. But the main focus, the main driver would be STEM.
The thing that I key in on based on your explanation there is really around application, right? So this idea of not only here's the subject matter, but here's also how you use it. And it sounds like there are real great wraparound supports. Let's get you into a research lab. Let's get you some internships. Let's do a co-op program so that you can see how this application is showing up. And I think one of the key distinctions that I draw between a liberal arts program, and I'm going to throw this past both of you to see what you think. A liberal arts program and something that's a little bit more narrow is the narrowness of something like a Polytechnic to say, you're going to study this thing and here are the applied options for you. Whereas with a liberal arts education, it's here's the theory. The applications are vast. You could take this and do kind of anything in this space. Does that resonate for both of you? And Serena, if it does, how do you make a case to parents who are thinking, well, I want to send my kid to a school where they're going to have a job when they graduate, and so this openness is a little bit concerning or intimidating at the very least?
Yeah, I think that is true. But the way that we're phrasing this almost makes it sound like there is an application in a liberal arts education.
Yeah.
And I think of places like Occidental where their main focus is putting theory into practice. I mean, that is a huge goal. And, Carleton, where there's this focus on collaboration and working together and learning through experience, particularly with their study abroad programs and kind of that collaborative component to research. And so what I think, it is more open-ended. It's not necessarily, hey, here are these 10 internships that you can have in computer science or in research. It is, hey, let's take computer science and let's apply it to an environmental studies earthquake video game that happened at Lewis and Clark as a just random example there. But it's taking a psychology student and actually having them do biology research and work with a biology professor. And so it is, again, more open-ended. You kind of have to, and with the support of faculty, with the support of your community, figure out like, how am I going to apply this information in a specific field? And so I don't think it's always as obvious that there are research opportunities or hands-on experiences in a liberal arts education. And you might look at the biology department and say, well, there's not a ton of research here. What am I doing? But you may have the opportunity to work in a different field and to apply that theory or that information in something else. So I think that's how, that's the case that I make. I think for students who are really sure, I want to go into engineering, most liberal arts colleges aren't a great option for that. I mean, sure, there are the 3-2 options. You can study physics, but if I want to go into this very specific field, yeah, I probably am not going to push a parent to enforce that liberal arts education.
Sure.
But if you say, I really like physics, I may be interested in engineering, I'm not exactly sure, I like all these subjects and I don't know quite how to make them all work together, that's where liberal arts education can give you that practice.
Yeah, Zaragoza, what do you think about that kind of distinction between application and breadth, and the way that it shows up in those two types of institutions?
Yeah, I would say that, it's funny because, and forgive my dog for barking in the background, he's chiming in. He went to a comprehensive university.
This is the second segment today that we've had
Yeah.
dogs interrupt, so it's all good. It's all good.
Excellent, excellent. I would say this, that you are going to get a bit of breadth at a technical school, at a polytechnic. Many of them are going to require a lot of humanities and social sciences. I think, part of the main difference in the kind of breadth, it's still a little bit more focused when we're talking about breadth, in the sense that, even when I was working at Caltech, there was a young woman working in our office as an intern. She was a Caltech student, and she happened to be an English major at Caltech.
At Caltech, I didn't know those existed. Yeah,
They do exist. You can major in English at Caltech. And you can major in some of the humanities. Many institutes of technology have great political science departments, incredible political science departments, or economics departments, majors. So I would say the main difference is that you are going to be an English major who happens to be incredibly analytical, who, will have taken a lot of science, a lot of physics, a lot of math, a lot of chemistry, and so forth. So, it's interesting. I was looking at Georgia Tech, because they summed it up really quite well. Why would you want to do, liberal arts at a place like Georgia Tech? And they're saying, it is unlikely, that someone's going to pursue that for it. But, if you wanted to think about the world and think about addressing a lot of the challenges that the world has right now, and you wanted to, take a humanistic lens in addressing, the challenges of a globalized society, of a technological world, then that might be a really appropriate place for you to do that. So there is still going to be some breadth, but it is a little bit more focused on the sciences to a great degree, and
right.
and on tech. And,
As it ought to be. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this has been great, and I think it's a helpful initial conversation just to establish some definitions, to talk a little bit about the flavor of the educational experience at each of these institutions. We'll continue that conversation when we come back from break. But I also want to turn our attention to especially juniors who at this moment are considering different opportunities. What are some ways that they could determine whether they're interested in a polytechnic versus a liberal arts education? How might they conduct that research? And then some schools maybe that we think students should have a look at that might be of help to them. So we'll come back and continue this conversation. Listeners, don't go away. We'll be right back.
All right, good. We are clear.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Anything we didn't get to that y'all are like, oh, I wish we had circled back on that thing?
I think a little bit of the misconceptions, like liberal arts colleges are don't have sports, or that's a bad example for you, Ian, but some of those, I'm thinking of tech examples. I think we started with some of the Polytechnic, you can still study liberal arts at a Polytechnic. Yeah. But loving it.
Cool.
I might mention maybe because most liberal arts colleges, or at least people tend to think of them more as private institutions more than as public. So I might bring up some of the publics, like William and Mary or something, something like that.
I also think there's an important point around, if you're a student that's interested in the liberal arts, you don't have to go to a small college to do it.
Yeah.
You could go to a university.
You could
go to a polytechnic, right? There are lots of options here. And sometimes people will say, well, that's not for me because I don't want to go to a small school.
Yeah. And I'd probably say, when students are looking at their college list, particularly even if I've got a student who's looking at STEM, it's very rare that they're going to be exclusively looking at a tech school. They are going to be looking at those comprehensive universities as well that happen to have a really good complement of engineering and so forth. And I same token as for the liberal arts.
Cool. All right. How much time do we have on this last segment?
We have 13 minutes.
Perfect. Great.
Right.
Yeah,
Just let me
ready
know
when
when
you
you're
are.
Okay, all right. Got you in here. Final segment. Here we go. In 4, 3, 2.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In. We're having a great conversation today around liberal arts colleges, liberal arts education, and polytechnic institutions. We want to talk a little bit about how students can start to think about in their junior year researching these schools, finding the best fit for them and figuring out where they're plugged in. And I want to do a little plug here for our show survey, right? We put together a survey at coll.coach/podcast survey. And one of the responses that came in the last week said, I'd love to know more about different kinds of schools. What's out there? Can you make some comparisons? Can you talk about how to do some research? And so I thought, well, why don't we bring that to this particular segment and talk a little bit about some of the highlights that are out there, both in the liberal arts and in the polytechnic space. So I've asked Serena and Zaragoza to think a little bit about what are some schools that they know that check the boxes of these criteria that we've established today. But before we get to that, right, how should students start to think about where they fit in the landscape of higher ed, presented with these options of liberal arts and polytechnic institutions? And Serena, maybe I'll start with you to say, you've got a student that comes to you and they express an interest in the sciences, but maybe they're not sure. What can they start to do to figure out where they're going to be a best fit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously visits are a great way to do that. But even before visits, I think considering classes or circumstances like teamwork or clubs, organizations, extracurricular activities where you have felt most at home and successful. So think about what was your favorite class? And I want you to think about, one, what class do you like the most for whatever reasons, but also in what class did you feel most successful? So maybe it was a really hard class, but the teacher took a lot of time to work with you. You had the chance for class discussions, and that really helped you learn in that class experience. Was it a science class where you had a ton of hands-on opportunities? Was it a big class where you could kind of sit in the back and do your own thing and you paid attention and listened and loved it, but didn't have to interact with other students? I think in clubs and organizations, is it working behind the scenes in theater, or is it, again, being part of a team where you're interacting with a lot of people and playing a big role? That isn't a perfect translation, but I think if you really liked the discussion, if you really liked the teamwork and collaboration, then perhaps a smaller liberal arts college or a school with smaller class sizes, maybe it's a big school but has smaller class sizes, is a better place for you. If you liked the sort of anonymity, sitting in the back, maybe participating, but just not as much pressure to participate, then perhaps a bigger option or bigger classes, more lecture options is a better option for you.
Yeah.
So reflecting on your experience is that first step.
There's also that sense of, would you rather be thinking and discussing or using your hands and doing, right? So there's a real clear distinction there. Zaragoza, you often have folks that'll come and work with you independently. And I think they often will look at your professional background and say, MIT, Caltech, I want to talk to this guy because I'm interested in polytechnic institutes. They're probably surprised. I don't know if you ever tell them that you went to Notre Dame and you've got a great books background as well. How do you start the conversation with a student that is thinking technical school, but you're starting to hear maybe their interests and their talents might lie in other spaces? How can you help them to explore and verify that their interests align with where they might suspect they are?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes, one of the first things that I'm asking students is, how much do they want to work with their hands? How much do they want to apply what it is that they're learning? Oftentimes you'll see that within the realm of computer science. There are some students who do want a little bit more hands-on learning, and then there are some who are approaching it from a theoretical, more mathematical vantage point, and
Yeah.
and looking at how it impacts society. Okay, so we oftentimes do have that discussion. Do you want something a little bit more applied? Do you want something different here? And we'll have that same discussion when it comes to some of the other sciences like biology or chemistry and so forth, because those could be served. Those could a liberal arts college could serve those students. A comprehensive university could serve those students, or an institute of technology. So we always oftentimes have that discussion first. I'd probably say, with my engineers, oftentimes the conversation is going to be about, do you want to go to a comprehensive university or do you want to go to a tech school? Oftentimes, they hear about the tech schools and that's their main driver and that's what it is that they want to study. I'm getting them to think about, well, if you do want to look at some of those more comprehensive universities, you're going to have to widen your scope a little in terms of your high school curriculum, and you can't necessarily just simply be focused on math and science.
Right.
And we'll have to take a look at that. And I'm generally driving them in that direction regardless, because it's very rare that a student is going to exclusively be looking at a tech school. The vast majority of the students out there are going to be looking at both comprehensive universities as well as tech schools if they're interested in engineering. So those are the two big kind of overall conversations that we generally have.
I'm just laughing, chuckling at this idea of Zaragoza's engineers. Like when you're my engineers, it's like, that's great. Just a little collection of they're out there in the world building and making things.
They are out there building and making things. I will say one other thing that I will tend to bring up oftentimes to families, and it's like if you're studying French, you could do that in the US. You could study French to the nth degree in the US and speak it quite fluently. Or you could move to France, okay, and also study it there in terms of classes, but you're also taking part in cafe culture, and you're also living, dreaming French as well. It's not all that different when we're talking about some students who've got an interest in engineering or who've got an interest in the sciences. One method would be to, if you're interested in chemistry or biology, is to go to a college of liberal arts or to a comprehensive university, and you're going to learn it really well. The difference is going to be mostly the culture. If you were to go to a tech school, you're going to be living it, you're going to be breathing it, you're going to be surrounded by everyone else who's also living it and breathing it. So that's the main distinction, I would say, in terms of a tech school versus a comprehensive university. Versus a college of liberal arts, is that it's who you want your other people to be, your other peeps.
Right. That analogy is great. The France analogy I love. Serena, I feel like there's when we start talking about schools, right? So let's say we have a student who's open to these ideas, and Zaragoza, I'm going to come to you with the same kind of question in a moment. Sometimes there's pressure on us when a student says, all right, I'll look at liberal arts colleges. Which school should I look at? And then you've got to come up with some names and say, yeah, go check this one out. For my part, I know that I almost never recommend Reed outright to students because it's not just a liberal arts college. It's a very unusual, unique kind of college. And so that's one where I only will present it if I see students are really driven towards a certain kind of education. How do you encourage students to survey the liberal arts? What schools are really great at demonstrating what kind of opportunity are available to them there?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And the good news and the bad news is I think that liberal arts colleges have a lot of things in common, kind of what Zaragoza was just saying. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the differences really come into like the feel. And so you can visit, multiple liberal arts colleges in Portland, and technically on paper, they all seem the same, but the feel of them and the type of people you're surrounded by is very, very different. And so people would say, well, should I go to this or this, at Lewis and Clark? And I'd say, just visit that school. You will like one of us better than the other. And that's neither good nor bad. You get that feeling. But I think, some great options for some condensed visits are in the Portland area. Swing through the Lewis and Clarks, the Reeds, the Puget Sound, Whitman, Willamette, kind of our Pacific Northwest grouping here. I think the Claremont schools are a really great option to visit multiple schools in a matter of in a day. I'd spend a few days there maybe, because you have so much, you've got Harvey Mudd, which I'm sure Zaragoza could talk a little bit about in terms of, it is on par in terms of the tech portion with some of the MIT and Caltechs of the world.
Yeah.
And then next door, you've got Scripps and Claremont McKenna. So it just, they're all so different. And you get that feeling, like, again, technically on paper, they've got a lot of the same things to offer in terms of the classes and so forth, but the feeling is very different, and the type of students that you might be surrounded by is very different.
Yeah, I like the Claremont schools, I think, are great. So many good examples right there. If you're in the LA area, also going to look at Occidental, which has its own standalone campus you mentioned earlier. It's bigger than those other schools, and there's some interesting opportunities, I think, to be explored within Oxy. And then folks can also, if they're looking for something that's a little bit larger but still has a liberal arts kind of feel, I think Loyola Marymount and Chapman are good options within that area too. In the Northeast, New England, I mean, you can throw a rock and hit a liberal arts college. Like they are everywhere. And there are women's colleges that are out there. There are some really competitive schools, and those that are not quite as competitive, but still have really wonderful, wonderful options. Zaragoza, in terms of that competitiveness, I think sometimes out of the gate, people think technical schools, they think MIT, Caltech, but we don't want to just start every student's list with those schools because of the selectivity, because of the competitiveness. How do you help students to see what might be out there for technical schools to round out a balanced list?
Yeah, I'd say that, if you're looking at the West Coast, I oftentimes, included in some of those lists would be something like a Cal Poly, and you've got several of them. You've got Cal Poly Pomona, the famous one, San Luis Obispo. There's now Cal Poly Humboldt, which used to be an overall a Cal State, but they realized, hey, we do have a bit of a focus here on math and science. Let's make this a Polytechnic. Okay,
Right.
and so that's an interesting example. I think were you to move further a little bit east, there's always Colorado School of Mines, which is kind of a mid-sized school. A smaller school would be like New Mexico Institute of Technology. And then as you're moving towards, let's say, the Midwest, you've got Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology out in Indiana. And then you're going to find some really great ones on the East Coast too. WPI. You've got RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic. You've got Rochester Institute of Technology. Down south, you've got even a smaller tech school in Florida Polytechnic as well. So you're going to find a wide variety out there, I'd say.
Rose-Hulman's really cool. Very small, really kind of like liberal arts, I think, in terms of the feel of the campus community. I have a friend from high school who went to Harvey Mudd, who then did her PhD at Clemson, chemical engineering, who is now a professor at Rose-Hulman. So there's a little triangulation going on there in a way that you can incorporate lots of different institutions in a pathway if you feel like you're connected to education. We've avoided competition the whole way through. We've got 10 seconds. What's your pitch for the liberal arts, Serena? What's your pitch for Polytechnic Zaragoza?
Liberal arts, lifelong learners, able to adapt, which, as we know, is so important right now. And I think the flexibility of the education.
Awesome. Z?
And for institutes of technology, I'd say, hey, if you absolutely love the sciences, if you want to apply it and you want to be immersed within the world, make the world a better place, these are incredible places to do that, incredible places to get great analytical ability and analytical skills.
Great pitch, both of you. The winner is liberal arts colleges. I'm unbiased, but I'm going to go ahead and award it to Serena. They're awesome, and the great thing is that you've got to find the winner for you and your student and their personality and their goals. And it's wonderful in the US to have so many options to choose from. So please embrace that possibility. Serena, Zaragoza, thanks for coming on the show and talking through these programs. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When we come back next week, we're going to talk a little bit about independent counselors, right? Myth busting. What do college advisors do? What do they not do? Should you tell a school counselor that you're working with someone like Serena or Zaragoza or Ian? What's the answer to that question? And then also the role that a college finance counselor can play in your process as well. So we'll do a little bit of talking about what we do here at College Coach and how you can engage with that. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. In the meantime, enjoy the end of April and making your deposits all through May. Congratulations to you seniors. Take care. We'll see you soon.